Welcome to the Area Podcast from the Ames Regional Economic Alliance. I'm your host, Eric Smith. On today's episode, we're joined by ag tech innovator and investor Roger Underwood. He shares his entrepreneurial journey scaling Becker Underwood into a global company, his outlook on the future of agriculture, and why innovation, technology, and the Ames region are central to what comes next for the industry. This episode is presented by Flynn Wright, Iowa's premier full-service advertising agency, serving clients from coast to coast for over 40 years. Experts in crafting stories that sell, Flynn Wright prides itself on helping brands drive performance and stay one step ahead. Roger Underwood, thank you for being on this episode of the Area Podcast. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. I know we had a little trouble figuring the dates out and all, and I'm tickled to be here today.
You're kicking off season 2. You've always been on my short list. As you mentioned, we did talk about this last year. You had a busy year. I feel like you are never short of things to do, and we're going to unpack a lot of those things. Ag tech innovator, investor, entrepreneur, we're going to talk about all of those things, but part of the complication last year was you were also part of the Board of Regents 12-member presidential search. I'm sure that was top of mind for you for a long time.
The Iowa State presidential search.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a busy time. Lots and lots of meetings, and it's always invigorating to have such a broad and wide group of people representing every different constituency, it seems, across the university. Makes for a solid search.
So when that ask came, was it an instant yes?
Well, I had told several people that I was going to no longer serve on a search committee like that, just because it would have been my third presidential search committee at Iowa State, and maybe it's time for somebody else. But when I was asked, how could I say no?
But really, how do you? I mean, it's an honor.
It was an honor, and it is an honor, and we got to meet some really fine candidates. You didn't ask, but there's legislation that's been introduced already by one of the Iowa legislators to even compress the committee to just regents, and I have to say that I disagree with that legislation. I think you handicap the incoming president, whoever they may be, by not having the broad and wide university represented, from faculty to students to grad students to PNS, and I think you need that.
Yeah.
And so I disagree with that. Now, part of the legislation is also that they would keep the candidate's name secret until they announce the next president. I do agree with that. We had 3 candidates drop out of the search process, and I can tell you it's because they got cold feet on having their name released. So while I know that the ACLU and others in the open record side say it all ought to be on the table, I can tell you that it costs you a lot of candidates. Now, the final choice, David Cook, he's going to be a very fine president. He's going to hit the ground running as an Iowa State grad, and so I consider the search very successful.
So we had an opportunity just through our organization. We went to Fargo last year and had an opportunity to meet him and listen to him then when he was at Fargo. And this was before President Winterstein announced her retirement and kicked up all of that. And I know from myself and other people in our organization, we were really impressed. And we're hopeful that, he would choose to put his name up for the candidacy, whenever that would come. Of course, it came much quicker than what we realized at the time. But so how, actually didn't anticipate starting this episode this way, but this is great. How much time did this require of you? And what is that vetting process like? Because I think and I'm paraphrasing the number, but heard something like there was 80 different applicants, for the position. I don't know if that's entirely accurate, but it's a lot.
Well, that is very accurate. Yeah. I'm tickled that the rumor mill didn't have it at 180 or 8. It was 80.
Okay.
Maybe it was 81, but I think I want to have in my mind it was 80. So the way the process starts is that you're appointed to the committee, and then immediately, there's a headhunting firm involved, which is critical because they know a lot of candidates. They've been working with candidates. Their Rolodex is, basically from about here to Gilbert. and they know candidates that want to be a president of a university. They know candidates that fit the profile of a place like Iowa State University. And while I think they were involved in placing David Cook at Fargo, David put his own name in the hat, which says, "Hey, I'm a free candidate to be had." I had 5 people recommend David Cook to me to say he should be in the search. A couple of them were people that I know, in fact, were on that Fargo visit.
Yeah.
Another was a university person that said, you talk about a guy that fits a land-grant university like Iowa State, and oh, by the way, he's an alum, which, of course, we knew right away. Yeah. So he was highly recommended. Many other people on the committee said they also had people recommend those names. But you then turn the headhunter loose. They place an ad in various places in higher education, and then the candidate names roll in. But most of the names that I would say are the qualified names are ones that the headhunting firm has gone out and wrestled to the ground. And we had some people apply that, frankly, were dismissed kind of in the process pretty early on. They just didn't rise to the top. And then you go through a series of us getting together and reading 80 resumes that sometimes are 40 pages long, and with all of their citations and whatever. It's really a labor-intensive process. And then you narrow it down, and we did Zoom interviews and narrowed it down. We did 8 Zoom interviews. I don't think I'm releasing anything that isn't secret, but we did 8 Zoom interviews and then narrowed it down to 5, and then 3 dropped out, and we brought 2 to campus, and they were both highly qualified candidates.
Well, I sat in the room when both of them presented, just in the public forum space at the Memorial Union, and you couldn't walk away from either of their presentations without knowing that Iowa State University is going to be in good hands moving forward. And I would imagine that the other 3 candidates, and even beyond that, what's interesting about this role is they're all highly accomplished. So when you talk about, just the secrecy of the name, they're all highly accomplished already, and all likely have really good roles wherever they're currently at. And so it gets complicated when your name does get out there, and, one out of whoever the finalists are, that number, only one of them gets it, and the others have to go back. And it's not that they ever probably dislike their role. It's just, these types of opportunities are unique, and it's great for them to pursue it.
It's I know there's a constituency that says every name ought to be in the table the whole time, all the time, wide open, total transparency. But you can imagine that a candidate is going through the funnel of, do I put my name in the beginning? Do I even let myself be considered as a candidate? And then at some point, under the current system, their name surfaces. So while they come to campus and they visit and meet people and they say, there's no place I'd rather be than Iowa State University, then they got to go back to their university, right, and they've got to then say, there's no place I'd rather be than XYZ University. And that frightens some people. And people that are probably candidates to Iowa State, maybe this is their last stop. Maybe this is their second to the last stop, like we've had with several of our recent presidents, like Dr. Jiske, and Steve Leith. And so candidates will say, I'm out.
Yeah.
And I can't blame them. University of Minnesota, their last 2 presidents have been in a non-open search. They basically said, here's our next president. And they were both successful candidates. But anyway, it was a great process. Yeah. We had great leadership from the 4 regents that were on the committee, and again, the other people that represented the other 8 constituencies across the university: alumni, athletics, the faculty senate. Everybody was great. The committee really worked well together, and I think that the Iowa State constituency was well served.
Good. Well, these are important roles. They're important not just for the university. They're important for our community here locally, but they're important for the state. And I think we're going to end up unpacking a lot of that as well. So let's go back. Let's talk about you. Let's go back from the beginning. I mean, you're an Iowa State alum, ag business. But you really took off shortly after graduation when you launched Becker Underwood with your friend Jeff Becker. Tell me about that launch.
Well, Jeff Becker and I were both from Atlantic. We're in the same class, and we kind of joked around a little bit, through the years that, boy, we should have a business together someday, yuck, yuck, yuck. And you don't know what that means in high school, but, you said that to your best friend. And we grew up hunting and trapping and fishing and goofing around together. And I went off to Iowa State, and he stayed home in the family real estate business. And then I went to Minnesota and worked for a couple different ag companies, but always had this burning desire. And then one day the light bulb went off on this product, and I basically took Friday off and drove to Atlantic and found Jeff at 707 Birch, where he was living in Atlantic. And I remember saying, hey, I have this idea for a company. And he says, great. He said, what is it? Told him we're going to make a spray colorant for Roundup herbicide so you could see where you spray it. And he says, sounds interesting. Does anybody make it now? And I'd say, no, it's a crazy idea. And he'd say, do you know how to make it? And I'd say, no. And he said, do you know where we'd make it? And I said, I have no idea. And he said, what would we call the product? And I says, who knows? And he stood up and shook my hand and said, let's do it. And while that might frighten you about the way Jeff Becker and I think, we were 24 years old, yeah. And it was the third week of July of 1982. And I said, let's go to Ames. And we knew this little building was sitting empty at 701 Dayton, right across from 3M. And a gentleman from Atlantic owned this facility, and it had a big fertilizer tank. And I worked for this guy when I was a student, unloading railroad cars of liquid fertilizer and then loading it into semis in the spring. And so we made a deal with him that we would run his liquid fertilizer terminal for free if we could use that 640 square foot building for free. And that's where we started, and we lived in that building after we kicked all the raccoons out. And that's where we developed the product, and that's where we lived until the Fire Marshal Jerry Johnson found out we were living there too, and he gave us the boot, and we've never looked back.
This is like a movie. I mean, can any script writers who are listening, can we turn this into something? I mean, but truly, I mean, is this like a byproduct of being 24 years old and this idea? Like you can live different when you're 24.
Well, you can, and we didn't have any money. I think we each said we had about $3,500 between us, and we figured out many years later we were both lying. We didn't have that kind of money. But, we were fearless. I've kind of gone through life, as I think Jeff has as well, in this don't be afraid mentality.
Yeah.
And so calculated risks and don't be afraid, and so that's the way we've kind of proceeded.
You didn't have anything to lose back then. It's different, as careers progress. I mean, for anyone to take a risk, it changes. Do you still kind of go back to that thinking at times?
I feel that I've never really left that level of thinking. I was blessed in that I worked for a couple different farmers growing up in Atlantic, and they were so instrumental in helping me know how to think and take calculated risks and make decisions based on risk and reward. And I owe a lot to Valley and Paul Pellet, a pair of brothers that really were instrumental in my thinking, even to this day. And you don't have much to lose. I had my 79 Dodge Colt and a sleeping bag and cot, basically, like what we were living on out at 701 Dayton. But we had an idea, and we wanted to chase that idea. So it was the American dream, and that's what we always wanted, and we chased it.
So as you're developing this technology, I mean, you had some background, I'm guessing, from the university and personal interests as well, where at least you thought, okay, we can develop this. Now, how we do it and what it exactly is, early on you didn't know, but what was that process? What was that development process like? It wasn't overnight.
It wasn't, but if you go back to the fact that Jeff and I started a chemical company, Jeff stayed home in the family real estate business and was doing very well. He's smart. He's very smart. He's book smart. He's a genius when it comes to kind of operational thinking. He's just frankly, a genius. I flunked freshman chemistry twice before I passed it. So we started a chemical company. Now, I guess that really goes to show that we are risk takers.
Yeah.
And neither Jeff or I were the valedictorian of our class. I think both of us graduated somewhere in the top 50 or 75% of our class. So, neither of us, set the pace. But we had something that very few people had.
Yeah.
We had an idea, and we weren't afraid.
So now if you fast forward, you reflect on this. This is a fascinating story. You reflect on this, and entrepreneurs are continuing today. So what's the takeaway from that? Is it the fearlessness? Is it the hustle of it all? Is it a combination of all of those things that made you, but will make others successful as well?
Yeah, and you got to drag luck in there a little bit, but calculated risks. Don't be afraid. How thick is your Rolodex? Frankly, I think the mistake that most startups make is they race out and they grab a whole bunch of capital, expensive capital. They give up a lot of equity so they can have a whole bunch of capital. And then they do stupid things. They lease a BMW. They find a suite with really nice offices, and they outfit them with the most, state-of-the-art furniture and computers and what have you. And then they do even more dumb things. They go to Starbucks every morning and drop $8 on a cup of, triple latte stuff I don't even understand, and they just make really dumb mistakes with precious capital up front, when they should protect that capital, hold it tight, very tight, squeeze everything out of their capital that they can, and focus on their product and focus on the customer. And then they have to hire really good people, and then they need to pay them very well. Yesterday, I spent 2 hours with an individual here in Ames that would love to buy a business, and I know him through church, and he just wanted to talk to an entrepreneur as he goes from working for somebody to what I think is a really neat opportunity for him. And I think he can make it because he understands kind of the process. He didn't come and talk about how much money he needed. He talked about how could he take care of the customer, how could he do this on a shoestring. That's the difference. Now, there are some companies where the technology is so deep and great, you need a big pile of capital, and that's really out of my wheelhouse. Yeah. That's not where I shine, and so hats off to those people and that want to go down that path.
So I'll fast forward a little bit. So Becker Underwood, you have this colorant for the spray. You've developed this, and now you're scaling, and over time you're working with a lot of big companies. I'll read off some, and I know there are many more, but you're starting to work with Pioneer, Monsanto, Dow, Syngenta. The list could go on and on. You could fill in the blanks with a lot more, but your company is now worth a lot more. What was that scaling like for you?
Well, there were some days that we used the term that many people do. We felt the wheels were coming off. I remember one year we grew $24 million of revenue in 1 year. And I think back to the first year when we sold $45,600 and some dollars the first full year. It took us 7 years to get to 1 year where we sold $1 million. And 10 years later, we grew by $20 million in 1 year. So it was a classic hockey stick. It was frightening. We made acquisitions all over the world. We went from being a company making one product to 7 years in, we had 9, and when we sold it, we had about 200. But we focused on ag and turf and the forestry industry. The seed industry became a real critical part of what we did. We got into some of the first biological products in agriculture, as ag has really made and turned into the wind, which has led me later to Pivot Bio and my interest there. But there were some years where it was really interesting. We hired a lot of Iowa State people, and we hired a lot of people that we felt were the entrepreneurial side. We had a lot of internships. I can't stress enough the value that we had being in Ames, Iowa, having Iowa State across town, and this deep well of students that we could hire as interns. And then we sent them all over the world to do specialty projects, and the ones that were successful, the most successful, we hired. Several of them are still with BASF working out of the Ames office.
So you made that sound fairly simple, but there comes a point, you start sending people everywhere. You have multiple products. You have a number of people working for you. I would imagine you hit a point where how do you wrap your arms? You can't wrap your arms around it anymore, or you have to do it in a different way.
That's fair. You have to have trust in people. You just can't have operations in a plant or two in Europe, a plant in Australia, a plant in South America, a plant in Canada, 3 in the United States. You just can't have that without having trust in people, but you hire really good people. And the secret that a lot of people do is they try to make their company successful by paying their people less. We paid our people very well. They were incentivized. They got bonuses. In the year 2000, we had this crazy, wild, successful year, just blew the doors off successful. We gave everybody that worked for us $2,000 a year for every year they worked for us. I remember we had one couple, Kelly and Harry, and their bonus check was over $50,000. And they both were blue-collar workers for us. But we were happy, Jeff and I, to share that wealth with them. And that's the way I think capitalism is set up to work. And I think that if you push into capitalism that way, it'll reward you back.
So looking back at that time in your career, what parts of it did you love the most? Because I know that when you go from there's the two of you and you're sleeping in the shop, and then suddenly you're scaling, and then years go by and you got plants all over the world. The work is different, for the both of you. What parts did you love the most?
I loved the strategy, where we would sit down in a room that didn't look a lot different than this, Eric, and a big whiteboard, and we would say, what's the strategy? How do we grow? How do we differentiate? How do we take care of our customers? And we would roll all those together, and then we would set up a plan and a strategy. We'd bring the managers right in. They'd sit right there. They'd see the financial projections into the future, and it's all hands on deck. And then we would go execute. I love the execution of the strategy. So you got the strategy, and then you go execute on the strategy, and then you bring everybody back together and you say how we're doing. You can do that in a weekly report, a monthly report, a quarterly report, an annual report, but you get everybody together. I loved visiting with customers, whether they were in Brazil or Bolivia or China or Canada or France, or frankly, we did a lot of business in the big broad agriculture in the Ukraine. Boy, what a changed place it is today, I'm sure. And I love to go visit with customers. I love new products. I loved it. I loved it when we would go in and go up against a great big company at a Pioneer or a Monsanto or a Bayer, and we'd walk away with the order. And we'd say, why? And they'd say, you guys have got more energy. You've got better people. You get back to us faster. Your response is great, and you always take care of us. I love that.
Did you communicate that feedback across the company?
Sure, because we always took some people with us on those calls. It wasn't me. I mean, my gosh, we got to the point to where I didn't even I never even visited some of our customers. We had so many in so many different areas. But we were very open about that. Whenever I would travel to, let's say, Curitiba, Brazil, where we had a large ag biotech factory, I'd get in front of the employees and I'd work through an interpreter in Portuguese, and we would talk about the company globally. So they didn't get to see, what we're doing in Littlehampton, England, where we had a nematode factory, or Saskatoon, and we would talk about it. We'd have slideshows, we'd have handouts, we'd bring in lunch, and we really kept it as much as we could like a family affair.
Yeah. So eventually, you sold the company off, and I know that this isn't a fair question because you are not an idle person in any way, but was that a tough decision?
It was tough on one hand, yes, because it really becomes a part of who you are.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they sell their company and they don't know who they are anymore because they just sold who they were.
Yeah.
And it was a tough decision, but it had gotten to the point to where we would go in to see a customer in the early days, and there'd be one or two people in the meeting, and you'd go to see that same customer when you're doing $35 million a year with them, and there'd be 14 people in the room, and 3 or 4 of them would be analysts, and you find out this guy's with Boston Consulting Group, and this guy's with Bain, and all of a sudden you'd go home and you'd say, these people are evaluating our business. It's kind of like having a mountain lion or a grizzly bear for a pet. That, when they're young, they're cute, and they get older, they could eat you. And we kind of felt like that might be the case one day, that they were kind of circling our business because now we were $250 million in revenue, and they're like, boy, that's big enough that I'd look good on our income statement. So Jeff and I felt like it was time.
Yeah.
So we took care of our people. We gave everybody $30,000, $40,000 bonuses on our way out the door, and we felt like we took care of everybody. Mm-hmm.
What didn't you know back then that maybe you realize now?
Financials. If I had to talk to an entrepreneur about starting a business, I would say you better understand your financials better, sooner, more often, and in more detail. Now, you have that ability. Jeff and I started off by going down to the office supply business just in the block east of here, and we would buy literally little notebooks with the accounting paper on it, and we did everything by hand. There wasn't a computer. We didn't have a cell phone. We didn't have text messaging or emails or Slack or any of that stuff. We had a fax machine, but not until 4 or 5 years in. But you better understand your financials because that's really where you make it or lose it. We had the luxury of, I was the one who focused on the strategy, executing the strategy, and the customer. Jeff Becker took care of the finances. I didn't worry about it. Jeff would come and talk to me about it, but I didn't want to worry about it. But I would say that that's what most entrepreneurs fail to understand is really how is their own company doing.
This episode of the Area Podcast is sponsored by...
You have a story to tell. That story has a job to do, to be seen, to be heard, to sell, to find inspiration and insight, to use persuasion to change behavior, to turn strategy into tactics, tactics into action, to sell. Nobody does that better than Flynn Wright.
Just south of Iowa State University, in the heart of the Midwest, sits the Iowa State University Research Park, 550 acres of opportunity and innovation. With over 1 million square feet of developed space, it's home to more than 145 tenant companies, from startups to global leaders. Discover innovation hubs, collaborative spaces, and a community that's shaping the future. Whether you're scaling up or starting fresh, ISU Research Park has room to grow. Visit isupark.org to learn more.
So, Roger, my first real introduction to you, you spoke at our agriculture breakfast event a couple years ago, and I was so captivated by it that I think I emailed you later that day and said, "Can I get the printout of what you talked about?" And you instantly sent it to me, and we collaborated on a story for Traction Magazine. But I was so fascinated at your global perspective to agriculture. It wasn't about just the money. It wasn't just about the technology. And it was about how can all of those things impact the entire world. And just, talking on the first half of this episode, like I see why you have that perspective. You don't have really a choice but to have that perspective because you've seen agriculture across the world. And I'll give a quote that you gave. You said, "The future of agriculture is borderless and global."
It's true, and it's been that way for a while. And for people that don't understand that, that's a sad statement to me. That's back to really not understanding your customer, and so it is borderless and global. It doesn't matter whether you're growing an apple in the Tri-Cities Valley, Yakima, Washington, or whether you're growing cotton in Mississippi, or whether you're growing soybeans in the Ukraine. I mean, everything is going which way. I mean, right now it's not really going which way out of the United States because of the tariff situation. But it is a global market, and frankly, agriculture's suffering in the United States, row crop agriculture anyway, because of the tariffs, because we've interrupted the global trade that has to go on. But agriculture is global, and it's very technical, and it's going to get more that way.
So unpack your thinking here a little bit for us when we think about Iowa and row crops, and then what are the next steps from that here in Iowa to the rest of the world?
Well, I think the next steps are the changing technology that's going to impact how we grow our crops here in Iowa. We're primarily a corn-soybean rotation, and we've ended up with a very small number of people that are producing our poultry, whether it be eggs, whether it be chickens, whether it be turkey. There's maybe a few more people with cattle, a lot of stock cows producing calves, and a shrinking number of people that are feeding out fat cattle. But right now we have quite a few farmers. I'd hate to put the number on it, maybe 30,000. I could be off there. Farmers in Iowa that are growing corn and soybeans, and that number's shrinking over time. But the technology that is going to be forced into that marketplace, technology that will lower the cost of production, technology that will grow those acres cleaner, using new technologies that will allow for a more efficient fertilizer and crop protection products. Better seeds are going to continue to come. But there are some things that are on the marketplace today that can improve how we grow those crops and maybe give us an advantage out in the world. But we need to do a better job here in Iowa.
Well, what's interesting, I remember when you spoke at our ag breakfast, you talked about precision ag really coming in, and decades ago, and actually probably not even that far along. There wasn't the technology that we have today. I mean, even going back to the internet, certainly satellite, drones, the everything else. It's just very different today.
It is, and it's going to speed up. That technology is going to speed up, and while AI seems like it's kind of new to agriculture, it's been around for a while, like it has been most places. But things like AI are going to, increase the velocity at which those changes come to agriculture. So gone are the days that someone would go to the state fair or the December or January, Ag Association convention in Des Moines and see some new technology and think about it for a couple years, finally implement it a little bit. Those days are gone. If new technology comes along, you're going to have to embrace it a lot faster, or you're going to be left out of the cost of production game, and you're going to It's going to cost you more to produce a bushel of corn or soybeans than your neighbor, and the margins are going to get tighter. And so you're going to have to, step up your game, whether you like it or not. And if we were sitting in eastern Washington where they grow a lot of tree fruit, we'd be saying the same thing. If we were sitting in the Imperial Valley of California, we'd be saying the same thing. It's just a different set of crops.
Are you seeing the adoption accelerating, or is it slow of all of these things that you're speaking of?
The more specialized and the fewer producers, the faster the technology accelerates and makes it to the final marketplace. So for corn and soybeans, for cotton, you can throw milo and wheat in there. The adoption is a little slower because there's lots and lots and lots of producers growing smaller and smaller acreages. But you'd be frightened to know how many people are growing more than 100,000 acres of corn in this country. That's frightening, to a lot of people because they're already big. And so they've got agronomists. They probably have their own technology team to evaluate these things. They're making changes, and their cost of production is getting lower all the time because they're more efficient.
Is that good?
Well, I think it is good. It's not good for the person who says, I'm going to stick with the old ways, but it is good, I think, for the general public as we efficiently lower the cost of goods, making new technologies available with those goods. There's a lot of things we can make from our ag crops, from corn and soybeans, whether it be biodiesel or ethanol, but there's food products that we can make. There's plastics. I forget the big leading brand of outdoor vests, Patagonia. 90% of their material is made with petrochemicals. Yeah, people that wear Patagonia material probably are against petrochemicals. I'm making a broad assumption there.
Right.
Probably you're going to get some letters on that. But why can't we make those vests out of corn, out of soybeans, out of milo, out of cotton? Why can't we do more of that? That's where technology can come in.
Has it shifted to that?
It is shifting. You go to a place like Eddyville, Iowa down there, and you go by Eddyville, Iowa, and they're hauling mostly corn, but soybeans in there too. And if you saw a list of the stuff that they're making from those crops, you would know what a third of those things are. If you go to Blair, Nebraska, where Cargill has a large corn processing plant, they're making the backing for carpet in Blair, Nebraska from corn. And they've been doing that for a while. So that's almost old technology.
Yeah.
So the new things that are happening are important. But I think, Eric, just as important is we're currently on a path where we're going to raise those same crops using different technologies. We haven't gotten to Pivot Bio yet, and you said that we're going to. Pivot Bio provides, it's a company started in California and using bacteria or biologicals for nitrogen for corn, cotton, wheat, milo, and using biologicals to create that nitrogen. We don't have to use natural gas to go through the Haber-Bosch technology to make chemical-based fertilizer that, frankly, runs off. And it runs into the stream, it runs into the lake, it makes it, the nitrates go up, and then in Des Moines, the Des Moines Water Works has to spend, 15 to 20 million a year pulling the nitrates out of the water, so they're safe to drink. Pivot Bio has addressed that market, saying we can use biologicals that produce nitrogen. We don't need natural gas. We don't need anhydrous ammonia. And that nitrogen does not at all run off. It attaches to the plant, to the root. It stays right there. Right now, it's providing 40 pounds of nitrogen per acre. Typical corn plant's going to need around 180 pounds. We're working on it. Just hang on, we'll get there.
Why is nitrogen important?
Well, you can't have a plant without nitrogen. That creates the basis for photosynthesis. And so whether it's a house plant or any other plant, think of the people. If you got a house plant in your kitchen window, you're probably going to the old car hardware and buying a little container of Scott's fertilizer, and that's primarily nitrogen. You're putting it in there with a little P and K. It just can't grow without it, and that's true with corn.
So how did Pivot Bio get on your radar, and then how did you unpack what they were doing to make the decision to get involved?
So at Becker Underwood, we made biological inoculants for soybeans because soybeans, it's a legume. I'm sorry, and so we'd make a rhizobia product that would be applied to the seeds, and then the plants would create nitrogen from that inoculation. So I knew that for soybeans. Corn has never been one that you could inoculate. It's just not set up genetically for that. So these two guys, one was a University of Iowa graduate at Berkeley in their PhD, tackled this idea that everybody said was impossible, but creating an inoculant for corn that could produce nitrogen. Everybody said forever it was impossible. It was the holy grail. But nitrogen runoff and nitrogen pollution has been a problem that these guys wanted to see if they could address. So the greatest inventions, I think, have been made when somebody said you can't do it.
Yeah.
I love that. And I love that about a university. We have that kind of that enthusiasm in Ames because of Iowa State. So this one guy, Karsten Temme, one of the co-founders, gave me a call and said, "Hey, Roger, would you help advise the company?"
Did you know him at the time?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not. But he just knew from what we did at Becker Underwood, and he's doing it on a different crop, a different plant. But the company was in its infancy. And I said, no, I don't. Okay. It was kind of like the presidential search committee.
Yeah.
How could you say no? Because this is a problem. I'm an environmentalist. I want to help solve that problem. So I said yes. And then I had to tell my wife that I said yes to one more thing that I said I'd never say yes to any more stuff, and I did. And
She knew.
Well, she should take my phone away. So 4 or 5 years later, the company's growing, and they finally wore me down, and I agreed to finally join the board. I was just advising them.
Yeah.
And I joined the board, and they called me the next day and said, "Hey, you're the new chairman." So that's been
Smart for them.
well, I don't know. It's been a lot of fun,
Yeah.
and the company's growing. We're off to having a great year this year, and acreage sales are going great. The data looks great on our Generation 3 product now, and it was a great team there, and we employ a lot of people across Iowa.
I would imagine, I mean, before you got to this point, though, you're having this conversation with them and advising. At the same time, you're diving into their technology and really analyzing what they're doing. I'm sure you're poking around in their books a little bit to realize, yep, these guys know what they're doing. I mean, you go back to your financial comment before, you're vetting all of this, I imagine, along the way.
Yeah, and they got bigger faster than Becker Underwood did by a long ways, but and they had some really talented people. One of the great things we did along the way was we hired Chris Abbott to be our CEO, and Chris is based in Wayzata, and he's been a great CEO. We've really worked on the team and put together a very, very solid team, and really gonna grow. But Iowa will really benefit from that impact because of the hundreds of thousands of tons of nitrogen fertilizer that's going on in Iowa that will slowly be reduced as people pick up this technology, which frankly, Pivot Bio nitrogen is less money than chemical-based nitrogen, and it doesn't run off.
So in addition to the technology, and you said you're in the Gen 3 part of the work, is it a whole education piece on informing people on the benefits of this? I would imagine with every holy grail, there's a whole level of skepticism around it as well.
Well, there is. And it's back to, well, my dad always put on anhydrous ammonia in the fall, and then he gave it a little shot in the spring with urea or a liquid fertilizer starter. We've always done it this way. That's the way my neighbors do it.
When it's comfortable.
Well, yeah, this is the way it always works. And how could I be losing much to runoff or how could I be losing very much, because it's always been that way. So those people, those innovators that have really turned to it, and also those innovators who've said biologicals in agriculture are the future. So I better learn to use those products today so I'm not left out tomorrow.
Have you seen that adoption come even more and more over the past several years?
We have.
Yeah.
We've seen the adoption come from what I would call the medium size to the large grower faster. They have the ability to understand those things. They probably have a little bit better guidance through consultants and advisors and agronomists than that see it that way.
Do you target these large producers specifically? And I ask not just because of the financial side of it, but more likely they have the infrastructure to be able to adjust and pivot more readily as well. Or maybe they don't. Maybe that's a poor assumption on my part.
No, I think that is the right assumption. Yeah. There's a subset outside of that, which is the more purist environmentalist grower that really understands that value. So they may not be the largest, but they embrace anything that helps to improve the sustainability side of what they're doing in agriculture. There may be some of the first ones as well to use cover crops and some of the other ways that you can create a more sustainable farm. And now some of those farms have figured out markets for their crops that they can sell to a processor who pays a premium because they pass along the value of sustainability. So people like maybe a Hershey or a Procter & Gamble or other companies will say, we want to pay a premium so we can say that our inputs were more sustainable. I think you're going to see more of that in the future. It's just tough right now in an ag market for people to pay premiums, but it's a great time for people to embrace new technology that's lower cost and better for our environment.
And is this applicable to farming practices outside of the United States as well?
It is. We have an operation set up in Brazil, and we have an operation set up in Canada. Not Europe, because Europe still has all kinds of rules on biologicals, which is kind of funny because Europe claims that they're the greenies, but then they have a raft of rules that go from about here to Duluth on getting an approval for a product to sell versus their current dirtier technology. Yeah. Go figure.
How has that learning curve been? All of the countries, that you're working in, not only are there cultural differences, I would imagine just farming practices are different, but then there's also the governmental aspects of each one of them.
Yeah, that is true.
And you touched on Europe a bit, but
that's true. But you go to South America, and because you have countries that are smaller, like a Bolivia or a Uruguay, they grow soybeans, or they grow corn, they grow cotton, but they've got a whole approval process that you have to go through just to get approved there. That would be like in the United States if you had to go to Illinois to get an approval on a brand new product, but then cross the river into Iowa or Indiana, you had to start it all over again. We have a big country that grows a lot of different crops, but you get approval, and you have to get a state approval, but the state approval is more of a rubber stamp. Yeah. So it's tough to get into some of these countries because of the bureaucracy that they've set up.
And I'd imagine some are easier than others, and
Some
some
are-
are incredibly difficult.
Some are snap your fingers, and some are you just don't go there with new technology, which is really shameful to me because then they deny their citizens in that country the new technology because they can't get out of their own way.
Yeah.
The red tape is so thick.
One of the previous times that we spent some time together, we talked about. I know that you had spent time in a lot of places, including Africa, where you saw hunger on a different scale. And I was really captivated by the conversation because I know that those experiences run really deep for you and continue to impact your decision making here locally. And so, when we go back to like this global perspective, you can't unsee what you saw, and it really does impact your decision making.
It does. That's why I really feel blessed that I've been able to spend my career in agriculture. Because our products at Becker Underwood were used on everything from tomatoes and sugar beets and mushrooms and corn and soybeans and milo and cotton and flowers and vegetable seeds, and the list just goes on. And so we help to feed the world. Pivot Bio, it's on corn, it's cleaning up the environment, it's on cotton, it's on milo, it's along those lines. But if you want to see really poverty and hunger, you don't have to go any farther than the suburbs of Mexico City. Well, you can see it obviously in the United States too.
Yeah.
You could probably see it in Ames if you were to kick around in the woods in the homeless camps. But on a broad scale, Africa does have a lot of hunger, and it's sad when you see it. But I'm glad that oftentimes when I'm there, we're trying to negate that hunger with a better product or a better technology.
You put your goggles on and look into the future. What shifts are you seeing today that will continue to take off in ag?
You're gonna continue to see the use of biological products replacing what I call the synthetic chemistries of yesterday. The standard to use a more common vernacular, the pesticides, and break that down to herbicides and fungicides and what have you. You're going to see fewer of those as we migrate more to a more natural, biological side of things. The biologicals aren't going to work as well as some of those products in the beginning. There's going to be that gap, and that's what people are trying to game. Do I start now or do I wait until that gap is smaller? Because what I can do now is I can spray a pesticide out there, or I can use anhydrous ammonia, and it works pretty well.
Yeah.
It's got some downside. It's got runoff. It's got degradation. It's got other things. Maybe I don't like where that pesticide goes, but that we can't everybody wait until that gap shrinks, because we're all part of shrinking that gap through the more use, the more we're going to fine-tune these things. So I really feel that in agriculture, you've got to get on the bandwagon of technology, and you've got to learn how to use these new technologies, or you will be left behind.
Does it help? Is that messaging? Does it help when it's originated, at least for some, say at the university level, or people who are early in their career, to sort of get this thinking? Because I would imagine, a 15-minute conversation around, you can do things the way you've been doing it. It's comfortable, it's convenient, it's easy, it's I understand how to do it, but there is a leap to making into the unknown a bit. But I feel like if you can have these longer conversations early in people's career in ag, they're more willing to adopt it.
That's true. And so I would say that if you took the average age of the people that are using some of these new biologicals, whether it be from Pivot Bio or BASF Becker Underwood, the average age is probably lower than the typical person who's using the older technology. But Iowa State's been great. They've been a great partner with a lot of these emerging technologies. And when you talk about some of the new precision ag and that kind of stuff, I mean, my goodness, they've got a whole program out here kind of south of the research park, and with Matt Darr that leads it. And I mean, I'm told it's the number one in the world, and that whole major or that department at Iowa State, Ag Biosystems Technology, is rated number one in the world. And I think that's a big part of the driver. That's more on the mechanical equipment, drone, self-driving tractor, all the technology and the planters and harvesters and what have you. But then we've got the crop input side, the fertilizer, the crop inputs like the plant protection agents, and the biologicals and that. That's where it's a different kind than what Matt Darr's doing, but together they're gonna bring us forward. We have a program in Kenya with Pivot Bio where we're working with the 1 acre size farmer. 1 acre.
Wow.
And we deliver the product to them on a motorcycle. When they call for it, we can deliver all their needs, all their fertilizer needs, in a bag about the size of the sugar packet that sits on your table at the Grove Cafe. And that's all they need for a biological, versus them in the past, they would have had to buy bags of fertilizer, would have been made in the Soviet Union likely. Yeah. It would have been shipped there. There would have been all kinds of graft and corruption along the way with these big bulky containers. And we can ship our product to Kenya, FedEx, and then they break it down to the little packets, and it's really efficient, and the grower wins.
So unpack that for me here a little bit. You know, we're talking about a company who's really has to think at scale. Explain to me how and why working with 1 acre farmers in Kenya makes sense. I know it does, but I want to know why.
Financially, it doesn't.
Okay.
We're losing money on that project.
But you do it.
But we do it because we want to know not just how we can lower the cost and improve the environmental footprint of corn in, let's say, Iowa, Illinois, or cotton in the panhandle of Texas. We want to see they grow corn and they grow cotton in Kenya. So how can we work on both sides of the scale and learn from it, and not just start big and then wait until we're going to get all the way to the folks in Kenya? We start on both sides of it. MIT grabbed a hold of that right away in a cooperative spirit, and they said, we like that too. We want to be working with people like in Kenya. So it's a joint program. But in Iowa, I want to say it would take a bullet and a half of anhydrous ammonia to do 120 acres of fertilizer. Maybe 2 bullets, okay? This is all the fertilizer you need from us to provide 40 pounds of nitrogen per acre. So when we get to 80 and 100 pounds, it's going to take 3 of these bags this size that you're going to pour in your tank and treat your seed, and there you go.
That's it.
That's it.
Give me a professional win from since the beginning of the year. You have any professional wins you want to share?
Oh, boy.
I always ask in the last week or two, but, it's the 19th today.
Well, one professional win is that we're just around the corner to where Dr. David Cook is gonna occupy Wendy Winterstein's old office in Beardshire. And so I think that's going to be a win for everybody here. Pivot Bio's off to a great year. It takes a lot of my time. That's off to a great year. Connie and I are expecting our first granddaughter from our son.
Congratulations.
And his wife, Chloe, and we're excited about that. So I think those are some wins.
That's a lot. That's a good start to the year.
Yeah, I can't be selfish.
Yeah. Well, Roger Underwood, thank you so much for being on this episode of the Area Podcast. If you're listening and like this podcast, we would love for you to share it. This is the Area Podcast from the Ames Regional Economic Alliance. Personal stories, professional journeys.